Good morning, everyone. I see our attendees quickly flowing in. We're already up to 50, so that's fantastic. Um, you're probably used to this by now, but we're going to wait just another minute or two because I know some people run into technology issues or what have you, so we'll give everyone a chance to get into the session before we get started. But thank you for being here, and we will be getting started very soon. Hi, everyone. I'm back. Just real quickly to answer some questions I see coming up in the chat. This morning's session is a webinar, so that means that only these panelists will be on camera. The rest of you, your cameras will stay off by default. You are also going to be muted by default. We do have the ability to unmute, but we would prefer to just use the chat. So if you have questions or need some clarification on something, put a question up in that chat feature, and we've got some extra panelists down. That's going to be Dorian and Mindy, who are helping out today, and they're going to monitor the chat for us and make sure those questions get answered. So for this morning session, no need to worry about your camera or your microphone. Those will stay off. We will discuss this a bit more later, but there are some educational sessions this afternoon that we're going to ask you to participate in as well. Those are a standard Zoom meeting. So in those, you will have the ability to have your camera and your microphone turned on, but that will still be optional. There is still not a requirement for you to be on camera if you do not feel like you want to do that. And Dorian has just clarified for me, I forgot myself that we are in, again, the webinar function this morning. So you actually have a Q&A instead of the chat. So if you have a question that needs to be answered, put it in that Q&A feature. That way all of the other participants can see it. You have the option to remain anonymous when you're asking a question if you'd rather not share your name, but we'll make sure that those questions get answered for you. So it looks like we're kind of making a plateau on people joining the session. So we'll go ahead and get started here. For that, I do see one last question of, will you be able to choose what session you do this afternoon? And the answer is yes. Again, we'll go into more detail a little bit later this morning, but we have 8 different sessions that are available to you, and you will get to choose 2 of those sessions to attend. It is entirely your choice which one you go to. All right, everyone, as promised, we're going to go ahead and get started. So good morning. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you taking some time on a Saturday to do this training. I know that it's never fun doing school stuff on a Saturday, so I sincerely really appreciate you guys taking time to be here and really do this for yourselves and your student organizations. Here in the Office of Student Involvement, we know how important student organizations are to the culture and the campus at UMSL. So we can't say enough how much we appreciate what you do. I'm going to go ahead and get the elephant in the room that this is a weird year, right? There's a lot of weird things. The fact that we are meeting virtually and not in person, there's a lot of unusual things about this year, but I am very, very confident that with all of your hard work and the team that we have in student involvement, it does not need to be a bad year. We're going to make the most of this year. It's unusual, but that gives us a lot of opportunity to do some new and exciting things and adapt to the environment that is around us and find new and exciting ways to succeed. So again, thank you for being here today. For those that have not seen me or met me before, my name is Rainer Gall. I am the coordinator for student organizations in the Office of Student Involvement. So I am almost always going to be your go-to person for any questions or when you need assistance with your student organization. We're going to cover a lot of content today, but just as a heads up, things that I can help with moving forward in the year. Again, really anything related to your student organization, whether that's just registration or managing your roster, if it's questions about funding, purchasing supplies for your organization, using the calendar. We're going to talk about the MyEngage platform that does a lot of those things for us. Any and all of that, I'm here to help you out. So never hesitate to reach out and ask some questions. One thing I do need to mention, apologies to anyone who has been trying to reach me recently. I was unexpectedly out for a few weeks early as my wife and I just had our first child. Our son, Jefferson Dean Gall, was born on August 10th, and we have been loving life with him. But as a result, I have been home and caring for my family. So I will actually still be officially out of the office through September 8th. But until then, the team that you see on screen here, Jessica, Dorian, and Mindy, they're all fantastic and have been filling in for me, and they can answer all of those same questions. But then on September 8th, when I return, I will be happy to answer those questions for you as well and make sure that your student orgs are able to succeed for the year. So moving right along, just some quick highlights for the day. So mentioned earlier, the day is split into two halves. This morning session is a single large webinar that will last at most 2 hours. We will probably get done a few minutes before that. We're going to cover first and foremost, just the impacts of COVID-19 for the semester. So I've got Jessica Longpeas on. She's going to talk about some policy changes. What are your expectations as students? What are your expectations as a student organization? And what are the implications for you? So that's going to include what you can and cannot do throughout the semester, but we're really going to focus on what is still available to you. As I said earlier, I'm confident we can still make this a great year. We're going to do our best to support you in that effort. So we'll talk about what those expectations are. We will also talk about just some RSO essentials this morning, so things that apply to every single student organization. I'm going to spend some time reviewing the MyEngage platform. I know that many of you are familiar with it already, but there are some essential tools we need to make sure that every single person knows how to use. There are also a couple new features that the platform has rolled out as a result of the pandemic that we're in, so we want to make sure you know about those new features. And then we'll talk about just some other resources that are available. We've got a guide on digital resources, things other than MyEngage that are available to you. We'll talk about your requirements for the year just as a student organization, how to maintain your recognized status for the year, and a couple last tidbits. We're going to take a break from 12 to 1. There is no content planned, no sessions planned. That is a lunch break or just a time off break for all of us. So take that time, go get some food, take a nap, do whatever it is that you need to do, and then plan to return at 1 o'clock, where we will have 2 blocks of educational sessions this afternoon. So block A is going to be from 1 to 1:50 p.m. and then block B is going to be from 2 to 2:50 p.m. And we will share a little bit later this morning a list of the sessions that are available to you. As I mentioned earlier, you'll get to pick 1 session for each block. So you're going to end up attending 2 sessions this afternoon. Those are all going to be hosted in Zoom, and we will make sure all of those Zoom links are available to you. So that is your quick crash course in what we're going to cover today. But moving back to the beginning of our list, I would like to pass off to Jessica Longpeas, who is going to talk to you a bit about COVID-19, what the impacts are for the campus this year.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Rainer. I appreciate it. I'm Jessica Longpeas, and I have traditionally been embedded in the Millennium Student Center and Office of Student Involvement. I've been with the university for 13 years now, but over the summer we had some changes. So obviously COVID has impacted the campus pretty significantly in a number of different places, but we also had some transitions in the Office of Student Involvement and some opportunities to merge some activities and some operations for the university as well. So my role has shifted, as has the role of Dorian and Mindy. So I did want to first acknowledge that, because because it'll be a little bit different going into the fall, seeing where folks are now setting for the staffing of the office and for the division. I've moved into a role as the Senior Director for Student Affairs, and so I'm working not only with Millennium Student Center and student involvement as I have previously, but I'm also working with campus recreation, new student programs, event services for the campus, and then our campus contract. So it's quite a bit of stuff related to the student experience on campus. I want to remind you, if you have questions or concerns, that you can always reach out to me and let me know that you'd like to talk or that you have some things you'd like to discuss. Happy to entertain that at any time when I'm available to do so. Dorian has moved into the role as the director of the Millennium Student Center and Event Services. So he's working with a lot of the functions that we're going to talk a little bit about this morning in terms of how student organizations can operate on campus in regards to events and activities. And then Mindy is now the associate director for student involvement. So all of those transitions happened within the last month or so. It's been a little bit hectic, but we made it through, and now we're here with all of you, which is super exciting, even though it's in a little bit of a different format than we would have wanted for this start of the school year and this training. So I appreciate you all being here this morning, for sitting through more Zoom. I know Zoom fatigue is a real thing, but we're going to try to make it as painless as possible as we work through the morning together. If you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A function like was mentioned already, and I'll try to circle back and answer those as we work our way through. But really wanted to start our discussion this morning just talking kind of an overview of campus. And for those of you that were able to come to campus this past week because you had one of your first sessions for your blended classes, you'll know that campus looks a bit different. And we also know we have a lot of folks that are operating particularly in a complete virtual environment at this point because a lot of classes went online. So to give you an idea of what we're working with right now, about 60% of our classes are online and the other 30% are in that blended format right now. So traffic on campus looks significantly different. So when we've talked about student organization activities and events in the past, there's been a lot of conversation about those pop-up events where people can just stop in on their way somewhere, or tabling where folks can pass by and you have a chance to interact. Those things aren't really feasible in the current environment, both because of the way that we've had to socially distance the facilities and the space on campus, but also because student traffic just truly isn't what it has been historically during the start of the semester or throughout the duration of the semester. We looked at student numbers for who was going to be on campus, and this last week we had about 3,500 students on campus in an average fall across that first week. We'll see closer to 3,500 students on campus each day. So for that to be the entire week, obviously looks a lot different for all of us that were in the student center and on campus in different spaces throughout the course of the week. It's a little bit quieter. And so that changes, I think, the dynamic for all of you and what that looks like to program for our student population. We do know that we still have students that are living in residential facilities on campus, and we do know that those of you that are participating today may well still be taking classes and be on campus once, twice, 3 times a week, depending on the meeting pattern for the courses that you're enrolled in. So it's not to say that there won't be activities that can happen on campus, but we have to have slightly different restrictions for what that looks like to make sure that we're keeping our Triton community as safe as possible. So Rainer kind of asked me to go through a little bit of the changes, some things that you've seen happen on campus, what that may look like in terms of usage of spaces and opportunities to get together face-to-face. So we'll walk through a little bit of that this morning. We'll talk a little bit about what those expectations are for students, faculty, and staff who are on campus. You received a ton of emails, so I know this isn't new information, but it's nice to revisit it again, just so that we're all on the same page. And then we'll talk a little bit about what those specific restrictions are for events on campus and what that means for student organizations, so that you can see what it might look like to plan something in a face-to-face format, if that's something that you choose to do or pursue this semester, or what it might look like if you decide to do most of your activities in a virtual environment. And as Rainer mentioned, when you get into this afternoon and later this morning, you're going to be having conversations about a lot of those technology resources that are available to you that'll make it easy to continue to engage with students in whichever space you choose to do that. So we'll walk through some of that. Please throw your hands up if you have questions. I do want to start this kind of jump into what does campus look like and what are some of those expectations by taking a look at some of the resources that are already out there for campus. So I am going to share my screen real quick and wanted to remind folks that we do have a safety website for campus. So this is the Stay Safe website that UMSL has developed across the course of the summer. It's the place where you're going to find most of your information regarding what campus policies and procedures will look like. And it's also the place where you're going to go to get the most updated information. Of course, the community is going to continue to receive communication through email. We always do that. For a lot of students, you're getting notifications about things through Canvas as well. You're seeing some information come through that platform. So we're trying to do as much as we can to connect with you depending on where you're at and what technology you're utilizing. Social media is great, and we'll put stuff out there when it's applicable, but truly that's only meeting the students that are in those spaces, and we want to make sure that we're casting as wide a net as possible. So recognizing that this is a great place for you to go, I wanted to start with this. It's going to talk through the guidelines for campus. If you've been on campus, you know that masks are required. So that is a requirement when you're in facilities or when you're unable to social distance outside. So that is something to keep in mind. You're also going to see pretty significant changes in terms of setups. And I'm going to highlight this little section over here that says employees, because that is a setup in the Millennium Student Center. The Century rooms are actually being used for academic classroom space this semester so that we can accommodate slightly larger classes than we could accommodate in some of the other spaces on the campus. So it's something to think about in terms of what's available and what is being utilized already. You're going to see a lot of social distancing. So tables are set 6 feet apart, chairs are 6 feet apart. You're only going to be able to have one person sitting at a table to eat in the nosh. You're going to see notifications across campus about how many people can be in elevators and how far to stand apart on the escalator. It's a significant amount of time and energy that's gone into planning to make our campus as safe as possible and making sure that we're adhering to CDC guidelines, in addition to St. Louis County guidelines, which right now are a bit more restrictive than some other places. When we talk about capacity, and I'm going to talk about the Student Center in particular and the Rec Center, because those are facilities that I work with most frequently, we're operating at 25% occupancy right now. So if you look at that for the MSC, it's a very large building. We can have about 1,400 people in there at a max, and that's going to be highly unlikely throughout the course of the semester because we have fewer staff in the building working in those offices. We're seeing folks rotate in and out, and then you're also going to see fewer students. So it's much different than it would look on any other given day, and that's true of most spaces on campus as well. So something to think about as you consider what traffic may look like while you're on campus. I think the other part that's really important about here on this website is talking about the community safety expectations and your resources. So I did want to highlight both of those things. The safety expectations, it's going to walk through the fact that we want everyone who's coming to campus to do a campus screening in the morning, a health screening in the morning before they come to campus using the Campus Screen app, which is downloadable for Android and for Apple products. So you can download that from either of those stores where you purchase apps. It's really simple. It walks you through a short set of questions, and then it gives you a pass for the day that'll show up on your phone inside the app, and it'll be either green, yellow, or red. So it's really simple to understand. Green, you're good to go, come to campus. Yellow, there might be some things we need to think about. Let's kind of look into that a little further. And if it's red, that's something where we want you to contact health services on our campus so they can walk you through what your next steps would be. In addition to those questions, we ask that you do a temperature check and make sure that your temperature is no higher than 100.4. So anything 100.4 and higher, you need to stay home. So pretty simple explanation of what the campus is hoping everyone will do, and we highly encourage you to do before you come to make sure that we keep everybody safe. The other piece that I wanted to highlight on this particular site, because there has been communication that's gone out, but for students, I want to reiterate this, especially as you consider if you're coming to campus for class, or if you were planning to do any sort of face-to-face engagement with other students that you want to think about, is not only doing a health screening before any of those activities and participating in any of those spaces, but also if you're having any symptoms or if you've been diagnosed with COVID-19, that there is a reporting structure in place that submits that information to health services so that our chief health officer for campus can connect with you, give you some additional guidance and assist you in what that may look like for the next few weeks as you continue to deal with any symptoms or recover, or if you just had exposure and they want to make sure that you're keeping yourself and others safe. So all of that information is housed here on that website. It's easy to get to so that you can go through it anytime you need to. The other piece with that is if for any reason you have been exposed diagnosed experiencing symptoms, there's also a request to return to campus, and that is being utilized by all of our community members, faculty, staff, and students. And so that's something to think about. You can't just say it's been 14 days, I'm coming back. You need to actually get written permission to return to campus from the campus health officer to make sure that everything is in line and that they have the right information that they need. There's also information on here about social distance, wearing face coverings, washing your hands, all the different disinfecting and cleaning protocols that you should adhere to. And then once again, it talks about staying home and what that means. So real quick and easy way to get to information for our campus. I hope you take some time to look at it if you haven't already. The other quick piece I wanted to mention is the resources for the Triton community. And I specifically want to highlight this because, as Rainer said, we're in a really weird time right now, and we recognize that. So we want to make sure that you have as much support as possible. You always have resources in student involvement and in student affairs. So the folks that are here this morning are able to help you in any way possible, connecting you to the resources that you may need on campus, or just operating as a sounding board to try to see what the next best step might be. But this space with the resources is really a great spot to go if you know you have specific needs. So if that's student learning resources, there's a ton of information about academic advising, support services, tutoring center, the help desk, all those things that may play into what you may need in a learning environment, whether that be in person or virtually. And then there's also information on wellness resources, counseling services, all of those different things that we know are incredibly important right now, especially as we continue to deal with a little bit more isolation and a little distance from one another. We're social beings. We know that it's hard to do these sorts of things. And so having these resources all in one spot is a really great way for you to connect in with resources on campus if you need them and you're not able to get a hold of someone because it's 9 o'clock at night. So those are some things that I wanted to emphasize on that Stay Safe website, just so you had some information available to you. I also wanted to emphasize the event process that we have on campus. And that is really, I think, going to impact how you're functioning across the course of the semester. And so I want to walk through what we put into place across the course of the summer when we were working on this, and talk through what that looks like for student organizations, so that you all have a good idea of what is to come as we approach, you know, some of the more busy months out of the academic year for us when we talk about student activities and events on campus. And ways to engage people. So the UMSL Event Services website, real easy to get to, umsl.edu/events. This is going to be the place you're going to want to go to get information. Oh, yes.
I don't want to interrupt. There's just a quick question in the chat.
Sure. Yeah.
It's where can we see how many cases have been reported? Is that listed anywhere on any of our websites?
So they are getting ready to start releasing that information weekly. And my understanding is that it is going to be a part of the Stay Safe website. I don't know exactly where they're going to drop that information on here just yet, because they decided to release that information this week. So we can get you additional details as soon as we know more.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. I appreciate you popping up. I can't see the chat when I'm sharing my screen, so it's really helpful to have that being done on the other side. Just so that folks know, I know that there was some misinformation that was out in the New York Times this week. They said something about UMSL having upwards of 70 cases. That is not true. Between March and this past week, the university had 23 cases they were aware of. And that doesn't necessarily mean that those individuals were on campus. It was just individuals that reported that they were either diagnosed or experiencing symptoms. So we are tracking that really closely to just kind of reemphasize about exposure and what that might look like, knowing that there's some people on there's more people on campus now than there were over the course of the summer. Health Services is doing contact tracing, so they're making sure that if someone has reported that they've either had exposure or that they are currently diagnosed with COVID-19, that they're doing contact tracing for the campus and making sure that they're notifying the appropriate people. They're looking at exposure in terms of what the CDC is outlining is exposure to a potential case. And that is not just I pass somebody in the hallway. And so they're really looking critically at what constitutes exposure and making sure they notify the right people. So please know that Health Services is working extremely hard right now, and they're making sure that they are communicating as much as they can to people that may need to know things, and that they're going to be doing everything in their power to make sure that our campus has the most up-to-date information as we move forward. So as soon as we get that information on where those positive cases will be, we'll send that out to the student org so that you know where that's at. Our event services website, like I said, is the place you're going to go for information about events on campus, especially right now as we're in this second semester where COVID is a part of daily life. Obviously, this spring semester, we left campus and campus was closed for the duration of April and May. So we didn't see a lot of repopulation at the university until we got into July, honestly. We had a lot of folks that continued to work remotely, a lot of students that participated in classes online this summer. So that is something to kind of keep in mind. This is really the first semester that we're coming back with an idea of what to expect and what this may look like and how we start to tackle this. So we put together a campus events task force that met across the month of July. And we were working on coming up with policies and procedures to make sure that events and activities could still happen safely on our campus, and making sure that we were prioritizing the campus facilities and spaces for the right populations of people. So if you spend any time on campus, you know that there are a ton of people that come in and out. So we have our students, our faculty, our staff, we have potential students and their families. We have community members, we have spaces on campus that are reserved by external organizations for conferences and lectures and those sorts of things. So it's a very vibrant space to be with a lot of different constituent groups, and we had to make a decision on who we were going to serve moving forward and how we kept our Triton community as safe as possible. And what that meant for us is that the university is prioritizing support for internal university-sponsored events and activities starting August 1st. So as soon as August 1st hit, that was what we started to focus our energies on. That means we're restricting campus facility usage to external clients at this point. So where you may have seen weddings in the chapel on South Campus, or you might have seen a Ameren come in and have a conference in the J.C. Penney building, you're not going to see those sorts of things throughout the duration of the fall for the majority of spaces. There is a highly restrictive process by which an external group can put in a request to utilize the campus facilities. It has to go through a vetting process with a committee of event and venue managers on our campus, and they have to have a compelling reason to be on our campus in order for us to even consider that being an option. So external clients right now are pretty much prohibited at this point, and there's very few exceptions where we would see that change. In addition to that restrictive policy on external clients, though, we also had to look at what the campus could accommodate in terms of our faculty, staff, and students utilizing spaces as well. I already mentioned that a number of the spaces in the Millennium Student Center are being used for academic classroom space. So that's taken a lot of those spaces that you currently are used to using offline. We can't utilize the Century rooms at this point because those spaces are going to be utilized for class Monday through Friday. Additionally, our small meeting rooms at this point, if we socially distance them, can only accommodate 6 people, and typically they would accommodate 40. So when you think about how difficult it is to do anything in those spaces, most of those are being utilized as small meeting spaces if there's need from an academic department or a student services unit on campus where they need technology they may not already have. We've also had 2 of those spaces come offline and become study spaces for students who are on campus, because we know when you're there, you may have downtime and you need to be able to do something in between the end of one class and the start of the next. But we need that to happen in spaces that are appropriately social distanced for your safety and for ours. So we have 2 of those small meeting rooms that are set up as study spaces right now as well. So when you think about the available spaces to reserve, we've essentially taken most of those offline at this point, and the SGA chamber If you all have been in there, and I know you have been because you come to SGA meetings, you typically can get 100 people in there. Right now you can get 21. So we just don't have the ability in some of those spaces we traditionally use to have groups of folks come and be appropriately distanced from one another and engage in a manner that is meeting the guidelines that we have set forward for health and safety at this point. We do still have spaces in JCPenney and the Two Hill and some other locations on campus. So those are still there, but we have to be looking at what makes the most sense. And best practice right now in higher education is that we're limiting classroom sizes to 30 or less. So when you talk about blended delivery of classes, most of you are going to be in classes that have 30 people or less. Now, some of you may be in courses that have more. And if you're in those courses, there has been a process to review the need to have those meetings in person. And then there's also been an intentional effort from the campus to find spaces to accommodate those classes. So that's why we talk about the Century rooms being used. Those can accommodate 50 people. It's bigger than what some of those other spaces can do. So knowing that that's the case and that that's the best practice across higher education right now, when you look at that 30-person cap, that committee decided that the same cap would be in place for university-sponsored events, so 30 people or less. And if it's 30 people or less, there's still questions you have to answer. You still have to have a health and safety plan, but we can accommodate those numbers in a number of different spaces easily, and it's not going to put a lot of strain and pressure on the venues that exist on campus. Anytime you exceed that 30-person limit, there's an entire vetting process, and I talked about how restrictive it is for external clients. Internal folks that are trying to do something similar where they are going to have more than 30 people, it is the same very, very intentional process by which we vet whether or not this makes sense. So events like the State of the University address, which is coming up in mid-September, typically has hundreds of people. That event is going to be virtual this year. So there's going to be a few folks that'll be present to present. However, the foundation for that event, which has typically been a reception time afterwards and time to mix and mingle, that's come off the table just because it's not going to be conducive to the health and safety of the community. So they're making decisions like that. You'll notice that there's a tab up here that talks about events during the pandemic. If you click this, it's going to take you to a section of the website that's going to walk through the campus event requirements. And this is the entire document that walks through everything that we took into consideration. It talks about all of the foundation guidelines for events, gives you everything that is a must-do in terms of hosting anything in a face-to-face environment. And it also walks through the process by which folks can ask for exceptions to those caps. For student organizations, and this is important, we have capped face-to-face events at 10 people. That is not to be punitive. So I want to make sure that you understand. We put a lot of thought and a lot of time and effort into considering what made sense for our student groups and for our campus community. You all operate much differently than a campus department would operate, much different than an academic unit would operate, because you're student-led and student-run, and that's important that we continue to do that. We also recognize, though, that you don't have as many resources and you don't have as many folks that are tied into pandemic planning or emergency management. Those sorts of things are very specialized areas, and nobody really has a ton of experience in the pandemic realm. I'll be the first to admit that, but you learn things as you work your way through it, and it's hard to put a lot of this stuff into place. 10 people is manageable. 10 people will fit into a number of spaces on campus. 10 people allows us to appropriately social distance. It allows us to provide support through the venues for events of that size. So it's very intentional, and it makes it as easy as possible for you to host an event, and makes it as easy as possible for you to come up with a health and safety plan for your face-to-face event that will make it as successful as possible. I know that it seems hard to think about how can it only be 10 people, but that really is a good litmus test for us about what is feasible, I think, within the structure of a lot of our student groups. Not everybody has 30, 50, 60 members. Some of our groups have 10. Most of our groups have 10 to 20. So it's really looking at where our student organization numbers lie, and then what that makes sense for the campus in terms of events and activities. I will say this, if there is interest in exceeding that 10-person cap and having between 10 and 30 people, you could choose to go through that event vetting scenario that I talked about for our internal and external clients, and you can do so, but recognize it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be very process driven, and making sure that you have all of the right processes and procedures in place, and you have to be able to ensure that that is going to happen when your event comes. And so I just want you to think through those things. We're not saying that you can't pursue that, but I want you to think through what your resources are, what your human resources are, what you have access to as a student group, and make decisions about pursuing that option that make the most sense for you. And we will support that in whatever way we can possible, but I do want to let you know that that is something that you need to consider as you think about events moving forward for this semester. We also have information in here. The executive summary is going to walk through the internal and external client processes. It also lists who that committee is that is going to vet any events that come through. And so you can see that we have representation from student involvement, but also from a number of our venues on campus, the Two Hill Performing Arts Center. Dorian represents Millennium Student Center Event Services, JCPenney, Ed Collabitat, all those spaces that we work with directly. And then we also have folks in athletics, marketing, and academics. So it was very intentional how that committee was structured, so folks could look at it through their lens of expertise and make sure that they're helping support the events and activities that we would have on campus as best as possible. That group also is a really great group of folks because they could assist in events that you decide to host virtually. So executive events, they have a ton of experience right now in the webinar and live streaming area. If we really felt like we needed to bring folks in to a virtual environment like this, but needed additional support, we could reach out to them and say, hey, can you help some of our student groups walk through how to do this? We have resources and can help you in a virtual environment too. So I do want you to think about what is the value of face-to-face versus what can happen in a virtual environment, and what makes the most sense, and then think through that as you plan what you want to do for the course of the semester.
JLP, we have another quick question.
Absolutely.
Is how about events outside? Can clubs maybe meet at a park or something occasionally?
So we have said that events that are happening on campus and off campus have to follow the same foundation guidelines, and that is not only for our student organizations, but also for our departments and our academic units. So you should have received a communication that came through MyEngage this week that outlined the foundation guidelines. It attached that information so you could see it, and then also walked through what the expectations are. So if your organization wanted to meet at a park and there were 10 of you, I don't think that there's any issue. But the last thing that you want to do is try to get to a park and have, 15, 20 people and have that be not feasible given other traffic that's in that space. So I want you to think through that sort of stuff. I also think it's really important to recognize that St. Louis County guidelines are still in place as well. So we're slightly more restrictive on campus than St. Louis County is right now. They're still limiting gatherings to 50 people or less. But as things continue to change in the public health arena, those restrictions may also tighten down too. So not only is it important to look at what the campus is doing, but it also is important to look at what the facility or space or outdoor area that you're going to be utilizing would look like in the county that it's in as well, because that varies county to county as we move through the St. Louis region.
Thank you, ma'am.
No problem. The other piece I wanted to highlight on here is that there are two forms down here at the bottom. None of you are going to use the external form, so you can ignore it. You're going to use the COVID-19 event request form for internal users if you're wanting to request space on campus. So traditionally in the past, there were a couple different avenues you could go through to utilize different spaces. If you were working with the Millennium Student Center, you may have used the web-based EMS client where you put in your reservation request and it was sent over to the Student Center staff. If you were interested in the Two Hill, you would reach out directly to the Two Hill staff. That is not the process that we're following anymore. We are going through this internal request form for any request for an event on campus. And that is utilizing any space that we have available. That event services team is going to look at that request. If it meets the criteria that have been established, and everything looks good, they can proceed with booking that space if it's available in whatever facility it is, if we oversee it. If it's overseen by another entity on campus, so the 2 Hill oversees its own space, as does athletics, we can also send that over to them so that they can book that space. If it's anything that requires an exemption, they're going to go through that process with that committee, and they'll return information back to the requester to let them know what next steps are, if that's been approved, denied, if it's pending additional questions being answered, they'll walk through that process. But you have to start with that internal event usage form. The other piece that I think is highly relevant is the use of academic classroom space. So 25 Live has been the system that we've utilized for reserving classroom spaces, and your advisor has to reserve that space for you. It's not something students and student organizations have access to use, because academic classroom spaces are managed differently. That is also not something that is online this semester. So the registrar has plugged classes in to the appropriate spaces for use throughout the fall semester. Everything else has been shut down in 25 Live, and they are still requesting that academic classroom requests go through this form. The caveat to that is academic classroom space is being strictly reserved for academic use at this point. So it is highly unlikely there would be a scenario in which you would be able to reserve an academic classroom space. That's for 2 reasons. The first reason is most of the spaces that are currently open and available are open and available because they're being used for classes, which means they're socially distanced appropriately, and they're on a pretty strict cleaning schedule with our facilities staff. And the last thing that we want to do is add another layer of complexity to that would require our facilities staff to have to go back in and wipe things down, or, you know, if they were to miss that, we would not want someone walking into class on Monday after something had taken place on Friday and we hadn't had a chance to go in and thoroughly clean. So those spaces are going to continue to be focused strictly for classroom use. Those classroom spaces that have not been identified for use for the fall are not socially distanced at this point. So they have too much furniture, things are too close. They don't have appropriate designations for where you can and can't sit. And so realistically, it's not feasible for us to go in and use those spaces for events, because we don't have a team that's managing those classrooms as event spaces. Those are traditionally classroom spaces that are managed by the registrar for classroom use. So that is going to be very few and far between. There are some academic units that are asking to use classroom spaces, and so they're going through that process. But by and large, there's not going to be ability to go into a classroom space. You're really going to have a very small number of venue spaces that are going to be available on campus. Hop in.
We've got a question about food service. Can you just kind of speak through what the options are, particularly with catering?
Yep, absolutely. That was next on my list. So perfect timing. So we are getting ready to send some information out to the campus next week that's going to reiterate a lot of our event policies, but also going to include catering information. So we have our food service operating on campus right now. Our campus dining is open. And that includes most of the spaces that are typically utilized, with the exception of the Southside Cafe and the Cafe in the Science Learning Building. Those spaces are just too small, and so it wasn't feasible for us to reopen those during the current semester. Most of those campus dining locations are on modified hours that are going to align with traffic patterns for the campus. And so you may see things closing a bit earlier or not being online on certain days. The Nosh is a prime example. Typically the Nosh is open on Fridays, but we'll be moving that offline because we looked on this Friday, which is the busiest Friday that we have for the semester planned at this point. And there were only 400 students on campus on Friday. So as you can imagine, not a lot of traffic in that space. So you'll see some modified hours. But we have been working with them on catering as well. Catering is still available, so that is not gone. It is going to look different. There is not going to be your traditional buffet options, just because those are high touch, high contact environments, and we want to make sure we minimize that as much as possible. St. Louis County health guidelines for reopening food service are pretty explicit about what can and can't be done in terms of multi-touch locations. And so those came offline, the buffets have come offline. You can do box lunches. They can box meals that would traditionally be buffet style, so pasta bars and stuff like that, can all be individual servings, and they can set all of that up. Same thing for pizza. We've talked about that piece as well. So you can still purchase catering, just know that it's all going to be prepackaged in single servings versus having some of those larger buffets and those style of activities that we've had on campus through catering in the past. You can still use Cater Tracks to place orders. So that is still live, and they're still taking orders through that system, and they can work with you if you're not sure how something would be feasible in the current food service landscape. If you don't know, can I do this? It doesn't make sense, or does it make sense? Can you help me out? They'll walk you through all of that. One of the things that is important to note right now, and it's really just a result of kind of where we are with a lot of the financial pieces that fall into our current operations. Coca-Cola has entered into a 1-year extension on their contract with us. So their contract was supposed to end in June. They've entered a 1-year extension, so they're going to stay with us through June of 2021. But we also knew campus traffic was going to be really low. We already were trending downward in terms of sales. And so they have removed that $9,000 in product sponsorship from our 1-year extension. So there will not be Coke donation this year. We're hoping that when we revisit that contract in the spring to implement for the 2021-2022 school year, that we'll be able to pull some of that back in. But for the current year, it wasn't viable for them, and we understood that. So that piece is off the table. We are still talking with Sodexo about what the fall looks like in terms of program support for student organization events and activities. And so we've traditionally had that pot of money, about $25,000 for student organizations to tap into for catering donations. That is still under discussion as we look at what the additional expenses are for Sodexo in terms of the current COVID environment that we're in, the number of catering opportunities that they're going to have, and if that's something that they can support or not. So as we get additional details, and hopefully that'll come in the next couple of weeks, we'll communicate that out to student organizations if it's on the table or not. I think that is the bulk of what I had to cover. I know I went through a ton of information, so please know if there are questions. I'm happy to continue answering those, but otherwise I can turn it back over to Raina.
Thank you so very much, Jessica. Sure. As she mentioned, that was a lot of info. So this is a good time to mention. One person asked in the chat if this session, if it is being recorded and if it will be available later, and the answer is yes. We are recording this session and the sessions that will take place this afternoon, and we will get those posted to the student involvement website here soon. So all of this content will be available for you to come back and watch and refresh yourself if you need to, or to share that information with others who were not able to join today. So yes, all of this information will be available at another place, so don't worry about memorizing every single line today. We don't expect that of you. We will make it available in other places as well. So
there was a quick question about vending that just popped up, and I wanted to answer that. We're working with our vending company right now to get those vending machines restocked. So they pulled product over the course of the summer, just because you obviously don't want to come back to expired product in August. So Evenco is going to be coming in the next 2 weeks and filling those machines that are in high traffic areas, so you'll still be able to get vending. That's not going to be an issue. Same thing for Coca-Cola vending. They're coming in and restocking product and making sure that those vending machines are ready to go. You may see some that are offline. Those are going to be in really low traffic spaces. So when we talk about low traffic spaces, we're talking about buildings that legitimately only have one class in them or they don't have any. We want to make sure that you have access to those things in spaces where you're occupying. And so we're making sure that we're intentional about which ones they're restocking. So you should see all of that get cleaned up in the next couple of weeks and have access to all of that.
All right, good deal. Thank you again, JLP. All right, so we are going to keep rolling right along. After Jessica covered all of that content, obviously the pandemic has had a lot of implications for the semester, but as we have mentioned as well, we're still determined to make it a good year, and there are still options for you to do things this year. There's a lot of options available. So that's what the rest of the day is going to talk about, what resources are available to you, how to use those resources. This afternoon, we'll cover some guidance and give you some ideas on how to plan events in a virtual environment. There will be a session all about SABC funding. So for anyone that was wondering, SABC is still available this year. And I have already talked with that committee about kind of realigning their goals and their purpose to make sure that we are still supporting RSOs in what they are doing. So we'll look at that as well. But for the rest of this morning session, I'm going to talk about some RSO basics, like I mentioned, some things that apply to every RSO across the board. So real quickly, just a reminder about your requirements as an RSO, the things you have to do to maintain your status as a recognized organization. It's fairly simple. We go through the annual re-registration process. A lot of you have done that already. Back in July, when I was getting caught up on those registrations, we already had, I think, close to 50. So that's nearly half of our organizations that had updated already, which is a great thing. For those that have not done that yet, the re-registration process, first step is to renew your portal on the MyEngage platform, which I'm going to show you just in a minute. We're going to talk about MyEngage stuff, but if you have not done that re-registration yet, you'll want to do that because that's how we get an updated roster from you, updated officer contacts, a current constitution if that has changed, and just really making sure all of your information is up to date. The other step to the re-registration process is training. So that is exactly what you all are doing right now. As long as you attend for the full day, and just as an FYI, we are checking attendance from the beginning and at the end of the day. So you need to prove that you were there the entire time. But once you have completed that training component, you'll check that box. And if your organization has completed the registration on MyEngage and you complete the training, you are registered. So your organization will be good to go for the year, and that registration is active throughout the entire school year. So once you're registered, you are good to go through the end of the spring 2021 semester. So at this point, I'm going to move on to MyEngage. So I'm going to spend some time on the MyEngage platform. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I know a lot of you are familiar with this platform already, but we know also there are some new folks in the room today. So we want to make sure that they get an introduction to the platform and how to use it. And we also want to talk about just a few new features that have been rolled out probably since the last time you may have looked at the platform. So with that, I am going to share my screen. Just a second here.
Rainer, while you're getting ready to schedule things, there's a question about if students are required to attend both the morning and afternoon sessions. So I wanted you to be able to answer that.
Thank you for bringing that up. And the answer is yes. In order to get credit for the day, there is an expectation that you attend both this morning session and the afternoon sessions. So as I mentioned, the afternoon will have a couple of different presenters. It will be multiple separate Zoom sessions, but we have asked each presenter to take attendance within their session. And at the end of each session, you will be prompted to submit a quick Google form. Actually, we've created a very basic form that just asks for what is your name, what student org are you representing, and what session did you attend. So to answer that question, yes, it is expected that you attend the whole time. Now, I will say I have already had a few students reach out to me that mentioned they were double booked or something came up. And while it is our strong preference that you attend today, and if you complete the full day, you will get credit for the day. If you are not able to attend for the full day, or if your organization only got one person here, or if maybe no one is here and you're talking to a friend of yours in a different organization, we will have some makeup options. Information on those makeup will be shared next week once we have gotten through the sessions today and gotten all of that information processed. So to summarize that quick ramble, yes, it is expected that you attend for the full day today, going until 3 p.m. We will be tracking attendance to make sure that you have attended. And if you do not make it all the way till that 3 p.m., then your attendance will not count, but you will be given a makeup option next week. All right, so moving on to our MyEngage platform. As I've mentioned multiple times now, I know that a lot of you are familiar with the platform, so I'm going to try to make this part of the session as nuts and bolts as possible. We're going to just assume that each of you know how to log into the platform already, how to access your organization. So I'm going to skip over some of those more basic things, and we're going to jump straight into managing your organization page. So when you're logged in, On your personal page, you should see in the middle here your memberships. That's going to be a shortcut to the public-facing side of your organization portal. But for the purpose of this training, we want to go to the private management side. Keep in mind that everything on MyEngage is filtered between the public-facing side and the private management side. So if we click on this grid icon up in the top corner, it's going to help us switch those views. You're going to jump over to the Manage view. So this is going to bring you into your Action Center, where you can access all of your management tools. And especially if you are an officer in multiple organizations, as you can see here, I'm listed as an officer in multiple, you're going to see all of those here. For the purpose of today, we are going to use our OSI test organization. And when we come into the test organization, something you see right off the bat is a warning here that says this organization is frozen. A new policy that we started this summer was a temporary frozen status for organizations that did not renew before July 1st. The university, the fiscal year, we all operate based on that same fiscal year. So for student organization purposes, we wanted to adopt that same deadline. So for organizations that did submit their registration and it got approved prior to July 1st, their registration was seamless, your portal is still active, you would not have noticed a difference. For any organization that did not submit their registration prior to July 1st, on that day, I went through and marked all of those portals as frozen. This is not to alarm you. It does not mean your organization has been deactivated, nothing like that. It is simply a temporary freeze on your portal, which means your organization is not listed in the public directory. As soon as you complete the registration process, we lift that freeze, your organization goes back to the portal goes back to active, and everything is back to normal. Important thing to know, if your organization portal is frozen, you as officers or administrators on the portal still have access to manage it. So even though this OSI test organization is frozen, I can still open up the organization tools and I can still access the things that I need to. So moving into the organization tools, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about the roster. This is probably the most important tool that we need you to manage for your organization. On your roster, a few things at the top you're going to see. First is your primary contact. In addition to your officer assignments, every organization portal has a primary contact, which is a standalone position assignment. When you are looking at your portal, if this primary contact is not the correct person, it is very simple to change. You're going to click on the little edit icon, the little pencil right here. That's going to bring up the list of available options, and you can select whoever else needs to be the primary contact. If you need to manage your position assignments, so we're talking about your president, your treasurer, other officer positions, we are going to click on the button that says Manage Positions. That'll bring you into the list of available position assignments. So as you can see in the OSI test portal, we've got options for a faculty staff advisor, a generic officer position. We've also got the president and the treasurer, and the SGA representative. Those three positions are required in every organization. So you're automatically going to see those in your portal. But you do have the option to edit these positions as you see fit. So if I wanted to say that the SGA representative only has access to the roster and no other features of our portal, we can come into the SGA representative position and control their management access. You can give them limited access based on specific pieces, all access, which will give them blanket access to the entire portal, or no access at all. If you have a position in your organization that you do not see in this list and you'd like to add that position title as an option, you're going to click the blue Add Position button. You're going to see that same worksheet where you'll give us the title of the position, whether it is a just general member or if it's an officer position. And then again, you're going to select that management access. Once your officer positions are all correct and you've got that list how you want it, when you need to actually assign a person to their position, you're going to come back to your roster, find that person. So let's say that we're going to assign Katie Gertler as an officer. Once again, we're going to click on the edit icon over to the right side. You're going to see a list of available positions come up, and we're going to select the position that we want to assign her to. So we're going to say that she's the SGA representative, save, and that position will now be assigned. Some other things you need to know in your roster. When you scroll down and look at your actual list of members, you'll see under here that we have a few different tabs. Your current roster, that is just all the people who are current active members on your roster. The pending tab is going to be students that you have sent an invitation to. So you have sent them a link to join your portal on MyEngage, but they have not accepted it yet. If they have not accepted that invitation, they're going to show up in this list of pending invitations, and you'll have the option to either delete that invitation or resend the invitation and give them a gentle reminder that they need to accept it. The prospective tab is a little different. This is going to be people who have found your organization page on their own, and they have requested to join it on their own. You're going to see those people listed here, and you will have the option to either approve or deny their membership on your roster. The last tab, terms and conditions. This is a relatively new one. It just got rolled out in the spring. This is only for officer positions, and anytime someone is assigned to an officer position, they have to accept the terms and conditions of that position. Some examples of that include that the president and the treasurer are the points of contact for an organization. It's who our office contacts directly for important announcements, when we need answers from an organization, etc. So by taking that position, you are agreeing to those terms. You are agreeing that you will serve as the primary contact. You are agreeing that your name will be listed as the contact person as the organization. So before your position actually gets listed publicly, you have to agree to those terms and conditions. If you are the president and you want to check that your other officers have done that, you can come to this terms and conditions tab, and you will see a list of yes, they have accepted, or no, they have not, and you can give them a gentle reminder that they need to accept their terms. One last comment on the roster. Something that we see with a lot of organizations is simply an out-of-date roster. You have a lot of people listed there who have either graduated or maybe left the university or are just not a member of your organization anymore. And especially in this virtual world that we are moving into this semester, it is going to be very, very important that we have a current and accurate roster. So we would ask that every organization take a few minutes on your own time to look through your current roster and make sure that it's accurate. Make sure that you are removing people who are no longer members. Make sure that you're approving your new members if they have not been added to the roster. So real quickly, if you need to remove someone that they are no longer a current member, you're going to select that person and click End Membership. It will remove that person from the portal. It will still show the record in MyEngage that they were a member from this day to this day. It will just simply not list them on your current roster anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and end Harry's membership, but I can add him back later if you would like.
Hey, Rainer, while you're in this session or in this, we have a few questions.
Okay.
Is there a way to send a link to invite members instead of sending email invites to your MyEngage portal? Or is that the only way to do it?
So I'll have to improvise just a bit. I do want to talk about the formal, proper way to invite people to the roster to get them added to your roster. You're going to click on this Invite People button on the page, and that's going to have you you'll add their email addresses, and it will send them an email notification that has a link where they just click the button, Join this organization. So that's the proper way to do it, but if you would rather not do that, then you can tell students to just go to MyEngage and search for your organization. So if I go back out to the public homepage of MyEngage, let's say that I want to join the student government. That's not a good example because I'm already a member of the Student Government Association. I'm going to join the accounting club. So we're going to go look at accounting club. Any student or any person who is logged on to MyEngage, when they come view this public directory of organizations, when they view your organization page, they're going to see a blue button to join right here. So if you do not want to send them a custom link through that invitation process I mentioned a minute ago, you can just send them the link up here to your organization page, or you can just tell them to go to myengage.umsl.edu, find your organization, and they can click that join button, and then you will be prompted to approve their membership.
Awesome. And while you're in the same screen, we had a question about how do you respond to messages sent from prospective members? So say someone clicks that contact button, what happens with that? And then how do you respond?
Excellent question, and convenient that we are talking about the roster. So again, this current page we're looking at for the accounting club, this is the public facing page, right? So this is the directory page for the accounting club. When you click on this contact button, it's going to open up a very brief message template. You'll give us a subject line of I'm interested in joining, or I need to report a concern, etc. And you can also type a quick message, whatever it is that you need to type. That message, when you click send, it is going to go to the primary contact for the organization. It will come to that person as an email. So if we go back in to manage our OSI test organization, bear with me for just a minute. You'll remember I mentioned at the very beginning of the roster, talking about that primary contact. It is very important that you make sure your primary contact is the correct person, because that's who is going to receive all of those notifications from the system. So if a generic student clicks contact for your organization and they send a message saying, hey, I'm interested in joining and learning more about your organization, that email is going to be sent to your primary contact. Your primary contact can then just reply to that email. The notification comes from MyEngage, but it works seamlessly with your email account. So you don't need to reply within MyEngage. You can just reply to that student's email and it'll come to their UMSL email address. Any additional questions, Mindy, from the roster section?
Let's see. We do have a question if there's going to be a mobile app for MyEngage.
Great question. There's kind of a yes and no answer. So the platform itself, MyEngage, does not have a standalone mobile app, but the platform is mobile friendly. And I know when we say mobile friendly, that's not always entirely true, but I promise you I have tested it myself and it really does work. It functions on a mobile phone. So while there is not a MyEngage app that you can download, you can open up your web browser on your smartphone, go to myengage.umsl.edu, and all of the features still work. So even when you're on that mobile version, you can still open forms, you can manage your roster, you can view the calendar, you can do all of that stuff. There is a companion app to MyEngage called Cork, which is C-O-R-Q. You'll learn a little bit more about Cork later when we talk about events, because it is primarily used for tracking attendance at events. So I'll go into more details about that when we talk about the events tab here in a minute. But to summarize, again, there is no mobile app for MyEngage specifically, but it is a mobile friendly site. So you can go to the web browser on your smartphone. And we would also want you to download the companion app called Cork, which will help you with attendance tracking at events. All right. Anything else, Mindy?
You know, there's a question about SABC stuff, but I think you might answer it later, so I'm going to hold on.
Okay, we will keep rolling then, and please continue to ask those questions in the Q&A. We've got Dorian and Mindy watching that, so either they can answer the question for you or Mindy will chime in and make sure that I can get an answer for you. Okay, so we're going to move on from the roster. Go back to our organization tools. We're going to click on the About tab. This is another important one we need to make sure you are updating on a regular basis. So the About tab is your organization profile. This is the information that's going to show up on the public organization directory. So we want to make sure that information reflects what you want it to say. So if we come down, first thing you see is the description, and there are two different boxes for that. There is a summary description and there is a full detailed description. The difference between those is, pardon me, I am struggling between Zoom and MyEngage. If we go back out to the public side of the website and go to the organization directory, this brief little snippet you see on the directory, this is your summary description. It is at most 2 or 3 sentences long, and it is kept that short because, as you can see, there's not a lot of room on this directory. However, when you go into a specific organization page, this longer paragraph, that's your full detailed description. So when you are looking at that summary description and that full detailed description, make sure that you're typing those two at the appropriate length so that it's showing up correctly to the public when they're looking at that public directory. So again, as you can see, the summary description is limited to just a few hundred characters, but the full detailed description can be as long as you would like it to be. Other things you want to make sure you update on your organization details. We encourage everyone to upload a profile picture for your organization. For most groups, that's going to be a logo, but we have other groups who it's just a picture of an activity that they were at. Maybe it's contact information. It can be whatever picture that you would like. And then we have more specifics on contact information. As you can see, none of this contact or even external websites, none of that is mandatory. It's up to you how much you want to provide there. But if you want people to be able to contact your organization in a variety of ways, it's important to provide those options to them. So while it may not be important to have a street address, we would definitely encourage you to have a valid email address for people to contact your organization. If you have an external website, be sure to mention that. And then for sure, your social media pages. We know a lot of organizations have their own Facebook or Twitter or Instagram pages or others, so you can tag all of those pages here on your social media. Going back to our organization tools, we are going to talk about events. So first and foremost, an important thing to know, when you want to create an event on the public MyEngage calendar, you are going to do that from within your own organization portal. So as you saw, I went into the management, I opened my organization tools and clicked on events. This is where we can see all of the events that have happened in the past or that we have scheduled. Because the OSI test organization portal is frozen right now, I do not have an option to create a new event. So important note, as I mentioned at the beginning, if your portal is frozen, you're going to lose access to a few features, but as soon as you complete the re-registration process, all of that access will be restored. Since OSI test is frozen, I'm going to have to jump out and go look at a different portal. So we will look at the student involvement portal instead. Okay, so we come into pretend like the last 5 seconds didn't happen and we're back on your organization page and we're looking at your list of prior events, but you need to create a new event for the calendar. We're going to click on that blue button that says create an event, and it's going to bring us into the event worksheet. Most of this worksheet is hopefully self-explanatory. Everything with a red asterisk on it is a required item. You will not be able to continue on the form unless you add that. For the purpose of this, we're just going to do lots of testing. We are doing an athletic test event. Test. If you are hosting an event and you are co-hosting with another organization, you can tag that organization portal so that it will show up under both organizations' list of events. So I'm under student involvement right now, but let's say we are co-hosting with Student Government Association. I can tag them as a co-host of the event. Some new options. This box that says virtual fair, please ignore that box. Actually, this is only showing up because I'm under the student involvement management. Individual organizations won't have access to the, or actually that's not true. Organizations do have access to the virtual fair, but we are not prepared to roll that out just yet. So we're gonna hold off on that. But another option is moving down to our time and place. This is where obviously you're gonna indicate the time, date, and location of your event. A new option in the world of COVID is to add an online location. So if you're hosting a virtual event that is taking place on Zoom or Discord or whatever platform it is that you're using, you can click that you're going to add an online location. You're going to be prompted to give instructions for how to get there. So whether it's a link or a step-by-step instructions, whatever it is you want to provide, you're going to provide those instructions. You're going to provide the direct link to your Zoom or your Google Hangout or whatever it is that you're using, and then you're going to add that online location. So that is a nice feature that you can indicate right off the bat that an event is happening online rather than in person. Event visibility, these options have not changed. Important thing to know is who you are showing this event to. Once again, if you want your event to show up on the public community-wide calendar on MyEngage, your event needs to be marked as visible to the public or to all students and staff on MyEngage. If you are putting a private event that is only visible to your members, then you can obviously mark it that is visible to only your members. But please be aware that you're marking that for the correct thing. If you mark invited users only or members of all hosting an organization, of the organization host, No one else will be able to view that if they are not on your roster. So even if it's a recruitment event that you only want available to people attending your recruitment event, if those people are not listed on your roster, they're not going to be able to view the event if you mark it as private. So make sure you're very careful with that. Moving on to our next page is the RSVP settings. So this is going to be another important one. If you're hosting a virtual event, it's going to be important to have people register ahead of time, especially since you won't be able to swipe their IDs or scan their attendance in a virtual setting. You need to make sure you're still getting their name, answering questions from them, whatever info it is that you need to gather from them. So we're going to set up our RSVP. You can limit the number of available spots if you need to. So let's say that you are having a very small event and you only have room for 15 people to attend. We would say that there is only 15 available RSVP spots. If they need to answer specific questions on their RSVP, we're going to come down to the RSVP questions and add as many questions as we need to. Let's say, for example, I need people to select a t-shirt because we are getting t-shirts as part of an event. That would be a radio button question. We're going to say, what size shirt? And then they will answer small, medium, large, etc. If your event is just open and there is no reason to have people register and you don't have an attendance limit, you can say that no one can RSVP, and that shuts off the entire questions and you don't have to worry about that process. The event ratings is post-event feedback. This is an optional thing, but it can be useful if you're looking for feedback on how your event went and if there are things that you can do better next time. This will allow you to automatically send a survey to people after the event has concluded, and it will just be a brief survey. Again, you can add your custom questions here, so you can ask like a text area multi-line would be an open-ended response. So we're going to say, how did we do? And they will be able to respond in that box and say, you did great, or no, this was bad, you need to change it next time. But once again, post-event feedback, that is optional. You do not need to add any questions if you do not wish to do that. Second to last page is going to be a photo. So if you have a flyer or a picture that goes with your event, you can upload that flyer here. We definitely encourage you to upload pictures because it makes the event look a little more appealing. Everyone knows that having a flyer is more helpful. But if you don't have one, you'll notice that this is not a required piece, so you can leave that blank if you would like to. Please be aware, if you do not upload your own picture, MyEngage is going to add a generic one for you. So just a heads up so you're not thrown off by that. It's very generic photos like hands clapping in the air or a sunset or something like that. Nothing really meaningful, but if you don't upload your own picture, MyEngage is going to upload a generic one for you. The last page you're going to see is just a quick data gathering for our office. Was this event partially or fully funded by SABC? We like to keep track of how many events have happened within the year that SABC has funded specifically. So we're going to say no, that our test event is not being funded. Once you have filled out all the pages, please pay attention that you are not done yet. It will bring you to this review page where you have a chance to go back and double check everything that you submitted. Once you have reviewed it and you're ready to go, you need to click that blue submit button on the last page before your event will go through. We run into people sometimes who get to this page, they think that they're done and they don't click the submit button, and it just kind of stalls at that point. So we need to be sure you're clicking that submit button for your events to come all the way through. A last heads up on events. If you submit an event, please be aware it does come to our office for approval. We have to approve everything before it shows up on the public calendar. But I will tell you right now, I am not really stingy on that. I scan events once or twice a week just to make sure there are no concerns or red flags about your event. As long as you've filled out everything correctly and all the information is there that needs to be there, we'll click approve and it's going to show up on that public calendar. Let's say that you have an approved event and it's 2 weeks away, but then the time of your event needs to change. So you need to go change your details. You're going to come back to your management list. We were doing the student involvement portal. So we're going to go into student involvement and we are going to come to our events list. as I mentioned at the beginning of the events section, you have a list here of all the events that you've already submitted and that have been approved. So you can come back in and edit events as needed. So let's look at the big event for the OSI. Let's see that I need to change something about that. I'm going to click on the big event. It's going to bring me to the event details page, and I can change the details, go back and change the time, the location, whatever it is that I need to change. You'll have to go through all those pages again and submit the event again. Yet again, please be aware if you make any changes to your event, that does get bounced back to our office for approval. But if you have made just a simple change of like the time or location, I can see that that's what you've changed. I'll see that it's all good. I'll click approve and you'll be good to go. All right, let's go back to our organization tools and keep rolling. I'm going to skip over a few sections that are not as important. The news tab is basically a blog for you, so you can make announcements within your organization portal, and you can mark whether they are visible to only specific people or if it's visible to everyone within your organization or even visible to the public. So you can use that for announcements and updates. The gallery is going to be your place to post pictures, so you can share pictures, and you can also share videos within MyEngage, but the video does not live on the platform. You can just rather post a link to like YouTube or Vimeo or somewhere else where there's a video that you have posted. Documents is kind of like a Google Drive for you. So you can post PDFs or Word documents there. And just like everywhere else on MyEngage, you can change the security on that document so that it is visible only to specific members, or it might be visible to everyone within your organization roster. Same goes for forms. You can create forms for your own organization. I will jump in there real quick to show you that, as I just said, you can manage the forms that you have created, or you can access existing forms that we have pushed out to every organization page. Some of them you're going to notice, like the 2019-2020 program supply order form, that is obviously not active anymore, so you wouldn't be able to access this one. And I just realized I am misinforming you. I am in the student involvement portal right now, so I am seeing all of the student involvement forms. So let's jump out to a different organization. We're going to look at student government instead. All right, so student government page, we're going to the forms on the student government list, and they have created a variety of forms for elections last year, application for the elections committee, et cetera, signing up for the Safe Walk. So you can access those forms that exist, or if you need to create a new form, you would also do that within this page. All right, last couple tabs under your organization tools. The elections tab is useful if obviously you need to host an election for your organization. So within MyEngage, you can create a ballot. You can ask multiple questions on that ballot, and then you can select whether that ballot is available to everyone on your roster or only specific groups within your roster. The nice thing about elections is that it is anonymous. So no one on the platform, not you as the officer, not even me as the campus-wide admin, no one can ever see how a specific person voted. You will only see compiled results of a total saying 16 out of 20 people voted yes, 4 voted no. You will only see those compiled results. You'll never see the specific ballots, so you can keep it anonymous, which is a great thing. The elections, you can also have them authenticated, which means that people have to be logged in with their SSO ID and password. So that way you can ensure that only current students or current members of your organization are the ones voting, and that you don't have people from outside the organization voting in that election. The last tab that we will spend a few minutes on is the finance tab. So for any of you who are a returning president or treasurer, hopefully you're familiar with this tab, because this is where you go to submit a budget request. I mentioned earlier in the day that SABC funding will still be available this year. That process has not changed. To request SABC funding, you're going to come to your organization tools, you're going to come to the finance tab, and you're going to create a new budget request. I am not going to go into details about this budget request process right now. That is only because there is a session this afternoon completely dedicated to SABC, where they will cover those in detail and tell you how to submit the budget, what can and cannot be funded, all of those rules that you need to know. As you can see, since the semester has already started, the budget request forms are active. So if you remember all of the rules about SABC and you've got some ideas for later in the semester you'd like to request funding, you are eligible to go ahead and start doing that now. A new feature, however, in the Finance tab that I do want to discuss. When I click the Create a Request, you're going to notice there is a second option there now that says Create Purchase Request. For those of you that were officers last year, you may remember something called the Program Supply Order Form. Once you have received money from SABC, the Office of Student Involvement is going to be the one to help you spend that money. It is not just cash that is handed over to you. We place a certain amount of funding in your university financial account, and you work with our office to spend that money. Because it's a university account, we have to manage the spending process. The program supply order form that was used in the past is being replaced this year by a new feature in MyEngage called the purchase request. When you have been approved for funding, you're going to come in to create a purchase request. It's going to ask many of the same questions. So give us the subject and description of what it is that you need to buy. The nice thing about the purchase request is that it's attached to the SABC budget process. So once you have been approved for funding by SABC, you can populate your purchase request from items that you were already approved for. So for SGA, let's say that I'm pulling information from last year, so I'm kind of fudging this a little bit, but let's say that we wanted to buy their office cleaning supplies. So I can populate from there, say that it was Clorox wipes, hand sanitizer, facial tissues, and paper towels. So we're doing the paper towels. As you can see, it has automatically filled in that the subject of this purchase is paper towels. We wanted a pack of 4 of them, and they were estimated to cost $8.49 per paper towel. You can also assign whether this is a general operations purchase or a programming purchase. And the account for each organization, you're only going to have one account to choose from, but you would select that as coming from your student organization account. Down below, if we are purchasing from an outside vendor or really purchasing from anyone, the Triton store or Walmart or Amazon, etc., that is going to be the payee information. So you're going to tell us that we are purchasing from Triton store. It is in the MSC. If it's the Triton store, you don't need to give us all of that address, obviously. As we go down, this is where the additional information is where you can give us some more details about your purchase, any of those last items that we need to know. So if you have an invoice or a quote from a company, or if there are specific instructions we need to follow when making that purchase for you, any of that stuff is going to be this additional information. I'm going to stop there with the purchase request process for 2 reasons. One, because I want to open up for any brief, quick questions, but also I mentioned there is a whole session this afternoon for SABC. There is a separate session that I will be running myself called RSO Budgets and Bills, where I'm going to talk about your university financial account and how to use your money. So once money is in your account, how can you spend it? We will talk about this purchase request. We will also talk about reimbursements. We will talk about how to make payments on your behalf. We will cover all of those details. So I will go into more detail later, but I did want to open up for a few questions right now. And it looks like Dorian's popping in with one.
Yes, so there is a question in regards to funding from May. So the person wanted to know essentially if they've made requests from the fall, from May, what's happening with those funds that they were allocated in May for events that might have been happening later.
That's a good question. I might have to answer that on a case by case if you want to contact me directly, but generally speaking, if you submitted a budget request in May for our early request period for the fall, and if that budget was approved, that funding should still be available. So just for the, frankly, because I have been out for a few weeks and have fallen a bit behind on updating some records, that may not be showing up within your portal right now, but we know that we approved that. We have the records within our own files here in the office. So if you were approved for funding and you received an award letter from SABC, that funding should still be available for you to use.
Eric, I wanted to jump in real quick, just to kind of piggyback off of that. If you received funding for an event that was supposed to take place in the spring and you were unable to host that due to the campus closure, that money will not roll over to the current fiscal year. So we've had a lot of questions coming in across the course of the last few weeks related to that. So if you were given funding.
Jessica, you muted yourself halfway.
It muted for some reason. It got angry. If you were requested money for something that was supposed to happen in spring and it did not occur, you were not able to roll that fund to the fall. So just wanted to make sure that that's clear for folks. We end the fiscal year on June 30th, and anything that is unused as of June 30th, it is swept back to the university.
That is an excellent point to make. Thank you for clarifying that, JLP. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, as she said, anything from the spring, that is all closed and gone. That process is done. But in May, we did have, well, in late April, we had a special request period for early fall funding. That was specifically for groups with plans for something to occur during the first 4 weeks of the fall, which would be right now. So if you submitted during that special request period and your request was approved, that funding is available. All right, before I move on, Dorian, Mindy, were there any other pressing questions that cannot wait until later?
It looks like we've covered most of them. So I do want to make a little disclaimer as a presenter this afternoon. I realize budgets and finances are a hot topic, so there will be no hard feelings if a lot of you end up going to those sessions. I get that that's important, and do know all sessions will be recorded and available for later. So don't feel obligated, we understand.
All righty. Well, with that, we've covered, I've still got more content to cover, so please bear with me, but we have covered really most of the info about your organization portal. So I'm going to double check myself in here, but we've covered all of the organization tools. We really encourage you to go and spend some time just exploring in these different tools to learn how to use them. As I've mentioned during the roster and the about sections, please make sure you take some time in the next week or two to update your roster, make sure it's current, that you're removing people who are no longer students at UMSL, and that you're also updating your organization profile, which is in the about tab. We want to make sure all of that information is up to date, that it's current, that it's accurate, so that people, when they're browsing the directory, that they're getting accurate information. A quick reminder that if you come into your Action Center and go to your organization page and you see this blue tab that says this organization is frozen, that means that you need to re-register your organization. The OSI test organization is sorted a bit differently, so I don't see the button that you all will see, but you will see a blue button over here that says re-register this organization, and that will take you into the re-registration process where you'll fill out a couple different worksheets. It's going to have you review your organization profile, review your officer assignments, upload a current constitution, check your profile picture, etc. Real quick note for, I know there are probably 20 or 30 organizations that they have submitted their registration, but it has not been approved yet. Once again, I promise we will get to it. I appreciate your patience and understanding, as I have been out for a few weeks and have not had a chance to catch up on those. But Mindy Dilly has been looking at a few of those, and I know that she's communicated with some of you, and I will be back in just over 1 week. And once I return to working on September 8th, I'll get through those registrations and make sure that we're getting them approved. Important thing to know, I am really all about supporting the organizations, and I am never going to penalize the organization for something that our office is moving slowly on. So for example, these registrations, even if your organization, your registration has not been approved yet, if your portal is frozen, your organization is still considered active at this point. So you are still eligible to submit a budget request right now. You are still eligible to submit in the Involvement Expo that's coming up next week. All of that is still okay. So once we get later into September and I've reviewed all of your registrations, if you still have not submitted a registration by the end of September, then we get into a bit more of a problem. But for right now, again, I am not going to penalize your orgs for something that we have not caught up on, but I promise you we will get caught up on it as soon as we can. Before I leave the MyEngage platform, I did want to jump back out to the homepage and talk about the student involvement portal. So if you come out to your homepage, search for student involvement, you'll see student involvement come up as an organization. It's important that you take some time to go check out the student involvement portal as well, because we do post a lot of important resources here. There are a variety of forms that we require organizations to submit throughout the year, and those forms are going to be housed on the student involvement portal. So make sure you're coming to look for those forms. You can also see upcoming events that our office is hosting. But probably most importantly, down at the bottom is documents. So we're going to post various PDFs and Word documents that share some important resources with you. And this is where you're going to be able to find those documents. So one specifically is the RSO Guide for Virtual Operations. That is a brand new document we just finished a few years ago. I have it open on my computer already, so I'm going to open that up. Co-panelists, can you check me real quick that you can still see this document I just pulled up? I'm going to take that as a yes.
Yes, you can. Sorry, it's just scrolling down. Okay, yes.
So if you go to the student involvement portal on MyEngage, you can access this RSO Guide for Virtual Operations, where we have summarized all of the different tools that are available to you. So you can read this in detail on your own time, but some highlights. A reminder for those that don't know, everyone within the UM system, including you as students, you have the same license of Zoom that we do as staff members. So you can schedule an unlimited number of meetings. You can have up to 300 participants in a meeting. You can have a duration of up to 24 hours. I have no idea why you would need a meeting that's that long, but it is available to you. You have the heightened security on it, and you even have access to request webinars like we're doing right now. So you have that same access to Zoom that we do as staff members. We've got some tips here about how to keep your team bonded and connected when we're in a social or in a socially distanced environment. So there are links here to some different articles and suggestions. And then just once again, some tools that are available to you. We talk about Zoom, we talk about the MyEngage platform, and we've got links to instructions of how to live stream on Facebook Live or Twitch or YouTube Live, whatever it is that you're wanting to do. And then of course at the bottom, if you ever need assistance throughout the year, or you have questions or just need to talk to someone, reach out to us. We've got our generic email address of studentorgs@umsl.edu, but you can also access my contact information, which is gallra@umsl.edu, and I will be happy to chat with you guys and get you the help that you need. Something else I would like to mention is the Involvement Expo that I mentioned just a second ago. So although it is going to be in a virtual format, we are still doing the Involvement Expo this year using a platform called Flipgrid. So all of you should have been notified about that a few times over the past month or so. We sent out some emails, but to get you caught up, the Involvement Expo is going to informally take place next week on September 1st. Which is Tuesday. And we are going to do that through Flipgrid, which is a passive website. The Involvement Expo is not going to be a live event where you have to be logged in at an exact time. Instead, we have Flipgrid where you post a brief video about your organization. People can browse all of those videos. They can reply to your video, and you will get a notification that someone has viewed and asked you a question about your video, and you can respond to that question. I'm going to pull up some instructions real briefly. Again, these were sent out to everyone over the past few weeks, but we will share them again a little bit later today. But there are instructions here of how to record your video on Flipgrid. It'll get submitted. We'll approve the video to make sure that it is streaming okay, and then you'll be included in the Involvement Expo next Tuesday. So please be sure you are thinking about that. Yes, Mindy.
Yeah, just a little note about the Flipgrid. I just checked it yesterday, and we only had about 20 student organizations in there, which is still like a decent amount, but this is a really great opportunity just to get your name out there. So I know a couple of you had questions about engagement. This would really be an easy first step. So please make sure that you're trying to get your organization on this Flipgrid. It's going to be really important, and it's going to be live and available, not just one particular day. So please make sure you get on there.
I'm going to stop sharing to get my face a little bit bigger on your screens. But yeah, so the Involvement Expo is next week. Some nice things about it being virtual are, as Mindy just said, it is available the entire week. You all don't have to be logged in at a specific time. You just have to submit your video, and it will be available on in throughout the whole week. people can reply to your video and you can answer those questions on your own time, which will be nice. And another nice thing is that we have unlimited space in the expo. So for those of you that have participated in the previous years, you know that we only had a limited number of tables. And once we reached that capacity, we were not able to include anyone else in the expo. That's different. Since it's online, we can have as many videos as we want to. So there is room for all 100+ organizations if you want to participate. Hopefully you've received those Flipgrid instructions via email, but once again, we will make sure those get shared a little bit later. All right, so last topic I want to talk about is a preview for the afternoon. So as we've discussed, we're gonna have a break for about an hour from 12 to 1. Zoom will be turned off. None of us will be logged in. You are free to go about your business during that time. So take a break, get some food, take a nap, whatever it is that you need to do. But please plan to return a few minutes before 1 o'clock when we will get started with the afternoon sessions. I am going to share a link in the chat very briefly here. I believe Mindy actually has it and she'll share it as well. We have created a Google Doc that has links to all of the Zoom sessions this afternoon. So there are 2 different blocks. There is a block from 1 to 1:50 p.m. We have a 10-minute break, and then there is another block from 2 to 2:50 p.m. For each block, you will pick one session that you attend. And if you are here today with another officer, we would encourage you each to attend separate sessions. That way you're getting the most content out of the day. I lied, and I am going to share my screen again just to show you this. But again, we are, Mindy just shared the link to this document in the chat, so you can all access this Google Doc. You will see that we had 8 different sessions in total to choose from. So we have, during the first block from 1 to 1:50 p.m., we have how to plan a virtual event. We have a session on recruiting new members and keeping them, effective recruitment. We have a session on organizational leadership, just some best tips and practices on being a leader within your organization. And then we have the SABC funding, which is going to talk about the entire budget request process, how to submit your budget, what can and cannot be funded, etc. After that, for the 2 o'clock session, our 4 options are going to be marketing best practices, so how to effectively advertise your organization. We have Lost in Transition, which is going to talk about the transition process for your organization, how to turn over from year to year and make sure there is continuity with your organization. We have a session about time management. We know that there's a lot going on this year, and especially as a student, as an organization officer, you have a lot on your plate, and we want to make sure you know how to manage all of that. So we'll have some tips and tricks for how to effectively manage your time. And then there is the RSO budgets and bills session, which will talk about your organization financial account with the university. If you have requested SABC funding, that money gets placed into your organization financial account, but there are a lot of different steps in order to actually use that money. So that's what we'll talk about in that RSO budgets and bills session, how to spend your funding, how to access the money in your account, what are the university rules on spending, etc. As a reminder, all of these sessions will be recorded and we will post them to the student involvement website sometime within the next week, hopefully. So do not fret if you are not able to attend all the different sessions. Obviously, you can only be in one place at one time. You'll be able to go back and watch the other sessions at a later time. For those that are not able to access the Google Doc, or if there are any issues with it, I'm going to jump back over to the MyEngage calendar and go to the Soul event, because you can access this as well. And Mindy has also added all of these Zoom details to the description of Soul today. So if you scroll down, you can see the links to each session that we have talked about, the 1 to 1:50 session and the 2 to 2:50 session. So you've got that information available on the Google Doc. It's available on the event on the MyEngage calendar. So hopefully you've got the access that you need. All right, once again, I am going to stop my share, and we are quite a bit ahead of schedule, so we can hopefully get a couple of minutes back this afternoon. But before we end things right now, I want to open up just one more time for any pressing questions. So Mindy, Dorian, if you could help me out and scan the chat for us, let me know if there are questions I can answer right now.
There is a question about the Zoom links for the sessions for block 2. If you go to that Google Doc that Rainer shared, all of the sessions and blocks are on there. but then also your presenters should be sharing. So like I'm a block A presenter, for example. At the end of my presentation, I'm going to be sharing with my attendees the options for their block 2.
Thank you, Mindy. I'm going to actually share my screen one last time to show you that Google Doc. We have included the direct links, so you should just be able to click on the link. But if for some reason the link does not work, then if you scroll down a little bit further, I've put the meeting IDs, the Zoom meeting IDs. So there's a manual way to join the Zoom meeting. You'll click join within your Zoom platform. It'll ask you for a meeting ID number, and you can type in that ID number instead if for some reason the links are not working. All right, Mindy, Dorian, are there any other questions that are pending in the chat that we could answer right now?
So there is a question about attendance for the afternoon. So again, you are required to attend one session from each of those 2 blocks. Just one session from each of the 2 blocks.
Yes, thank you, Dorian. That's correct. You are expected to attend for the afternoon as well. And as a heads up, each of the presenters has been instructed to take attendance at the end of their session. So once they're done presenting, they're going to check that you actually attended for that session. So it's going to be especially important for that last 2 to 2:50 block. If you are not there when they take attendance at the end, then your attendance isn't going to be counted for the day.
There is a question about how are we going to take attendance from this first part of the day? And Rainer, correct me if I'm wrong, but because we required you all to log in with your UM system and you had to register for this webinar, we get that report from Zoom, correct?
That is correct. So I will be following up in the next few weeks once I have returned to work, and we're going through checking on the registration status of everyone. But yes, we will pull the list of participants in this webinar and we will compare that against the list of organizations and their officer representatives. So we will be able to see whether you attended or not. And most of you hopefully are logged in with your UM system account, which will make it easier for us to track. But even if you are not, we should still be able to see your name and we will pull that attendance.
So there's a question about 3 p.m. training. So the training for today will conclude after that second session, which starts at 2 p.m. and ends at 2:50. So there is not a session after that 2 o'clock session that ends at 2:50.
That is correct. We will be done at the latest at 3 p.m. I'll add to that as well. There is not a formal closing session. So whichever session you attend during that 2 to 2:50 block, once your session is done, you're done for the day. You can log off. You do not need to return to the webinar or anything else. The webinar is going to be done as soon as we log off here in a few minutes. The afternoon sessions are standalone Zoom meetings. And again, once your session is done, whichever one you have attended, you can log off, close your computer for the day.
Got 2 more questions. I'll read them off for you, Rainer. Do we need to get posters stamped this year?
If you are putting flyers up on campus, then yes, that policy has not changed. You'll still contact the front desk and student involvement, and they still have their stamp up there. Now, if you are, let's be real that there's not a whole lot of traffic on campus, so you may be better served with some digital marketing instead. But both of those options, whether it's printing physical posters or digital marketing available to you, that'll be covered this afternoon in the marketing best practices session. So we would encourage you to maybe check that one out and learn what options are available to you, such as digital signage, which is an option on campus.
There's also a question about eligibility for Communicast as well, and if that's going to be covered in a presentation this afternoon.
So I'm not sure I understand the question fully, but I'm going to make a best guess that eligibility for commuter cash, you're asking if an event that you host can be included within commuter cash. The full answer is I am not the one to answer that, unfortunately. But the how to plan a virtual event session that is happening in the 1 o'clock block, that's being hosted by Jessica Mode, who is our coordinator for student activities, and she is also in charge of the commuter cash program. So she would be able to answer at that point whether your event can be included in the commuter cash process.
There's another question in the chat about breakouts for this afternoon. Do they have passwords?
They shouldn't. When I spoke with all of our presenters, I gave them very specific instructions that each of those sessions will use the waiting room feature. So as far as we know, you will not have to provide a password, but when you go to join the meeting, you will be prompted to go into the waiting room first, and the presenter will have to admit you from the waiting room. That's a great question, and I want to take a quick chance to mention, earlier I said that everyone has access to the same Zoom license that we do as staff members, and that is true, but it is important to know that the system over the summer has stepped up their security requirements with Zoom. So every Zoom meeting, regardless of who is hosting it, is required to have either a password or the waiting room feature, or possibly both if you want them. But again, that should not be an issue this afternoon. We've instructed all of our presenters to use the waiting room feature, so that should meet that security requirement. And as long as you join on time, you'll be in the waiting room and the presenter will admit you to their session when they're ready to do so.
We've got a couple more questions. One of the questions is how do they get access to their version, to the pro version of Zoom that's available to students?
Good question.
I can answer that one, Rainer.
Okay.
So
Want to
when you are going into Zoom, there is an option to log in with an SSO or log in. So what you will do is click that option, and then you'll just log in with your SSO and password. There is a section that's before you get to the SSO and password portion that's going to ask you to input your sort of your university or organization's portal, for lack of a better term. And so in that box, you'll put system, and then you just use your regular credentials from there. So again, that's your SSO and password, and it should log you right into that account. And that is giving you access to a pro account, just like the professional staff and faculty on campus have access to.
Thank you, Dorian.
There was don't have the schedule right in front of me, but there was a question about the third option in block 2. And they wanted to just know a little bit more information about what that session entails. Do you have that in front of you, Rainer?
Yes, so the third session in the list for block 2 is time hacks for the involved student. So that's going to be our grad assistant, Michaela Wells, who is presenting. And Mindy, I saw you pop your face in. Would you happen to know some more details about that session?
Yeah, so Michaela herself, she's a graduate student now, but as an undergraduate student, she was like really stretched thin. She was in a lot of student organizations, very involved, and she found some really great ways to cope with that time management wise. And I feel like a lot of you as our student organization leaders are in a similar spot. So that's more of like a kind of a personal development opportunity if you want to attend that event.
Good deal. Thank you, Mindy.
And then there's one last question that I'm seeing in the Q&A. If an organization has self-generated funds left from the fall, and are we still able to access those funds?
That is a great question. That one, unfortunately, I'm going to decline to answer that here in the webinar because that's going to be definitely a case-by-case basis. So that's something that you would need to talk with me specifically about. If you would like to send me an email and copy actually Mindy Dilly on that, I can't promise that I will be able to respond to it right away, again, because I am technically off work until September 8th, but we'll be able to follow up with you specifically about your case. So again, there are a few organizations who have self-generated revenue that they may have carried forward from last year, but that is absolutely a case-by-case basis, and I need to address that specifically with your specific organization. So please reach out to us with your specific organization and we'll talk to you about it.
I think there's 2 more questions that I see. How many of our officers need to attend this afternoon?
So the requirement for training has not changed from previous years, and that's going to be that we need at least 2 officers to complete the training process. So I want to clarify, when we say complete the training, that's supposed to be the full day. So if they were not here for the morning session, it will still be useful for them to attend in the afternoon, but their attendance won't count because they weren't here for the entire day. Now, having said that, as I mentioned earlier this morning, we will have makeup sessions, makeup options available. We will announce more information about that next week. So be on the lookout in your emails for that. If they were not able to attend for the full day today, we'll give those makeup options next week and give you a way to make up that training requirement. But to go back, the training requirement is 2 officers from your organization. All right, Dorian, unless there's anything else, it looks like the Q&A is all filtered from my end. So I am going to go ahead and call it a few minutes early. Once again, everyone, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate your time. Please enjoy the next hour, take a break, do whatever you need to with getting food, taking a nap, using the restroom, all of those good things. And we will see you back at 1 o'clock. Please keep that Google Doc link. And Mindy, I'm going to ask if you can share that one more time in the chat to make sure that everyone has access to it. That has all of the Zoom links for this afternoon. Again, that information is also on the event on MyEngage. If you go to the sole event page on MyEngage, the Zoom details are there as well. So you've got that information available to you. We look forward to seeing you all this afternoon. Thank you so much for being here, and we will talk to you soon.